MGM had a movie, it was about the Navy. And it was Maureen O'Hara and the big Western cowboy star. I had the Naval Aviation Cadet Choir from Pensacola out in California because the Miss Universe pageant was just starting there. And the guy who ran the pageant was a friend of mine, as was the guy who ran the hotel in Long Beach, who later owned the Proud Bird and the Odyssey. So we brought the cadet choir out, and they escorted the Miss Universe contestants at the big fancy ball. So we had them there, and at that same time, MGM had this Navy picture that they were going to release. So we took the Aviation Cadet Choir, which was probably about 40 some odd cadets, aviation cadets. We took them to MGM. We set up a photo session with Maureen O'Hara and a ribbon that said Miss Naval Aviation. So I had two photographers, and the cadets lined up on one side, Maureen O'Hara here, and each cadet came up and put his arm around Miss O'Hara, and the photographer shoot a picture. And the next cadet came up, the next photographer shoot the next picture. So we went through those 40 some odd guys in like 15 or 20 minutes. And then we took all those pictures and sent them to the Fleet Hometown News Center in Illinois, and they distributed them nationwide to all the hometown newspapers. We made a killing of publicity on that thing. That didn't hurt my reputation. They were in Hawaiian waters. They were all over the Pacific. We were pretty worried about the Russians and what their capabilities with their submarines were. And I'm sure the admiral had a lot of sleepless nights. Couldn't talk to anybody about it. Mother understood that was part of the job, and you don't talk about it. My next duty station was Fort Island, Hawaii, an island in the middle of Pearl Harbor. We lived in quarters built by the Army during World War I. I was the public information officer for Admiral Jimmy Thatch, Commander, Anti-Submarine Warfare, Pacific Fleet. The Admiral was responsible for tracking Russian submarines throughout the entire Pacific, all part of the Cold War. His forces consisted of aircraft carriers, helicopters, submarines, both nuclear and conventional, and surface ships of various types. The Admiral was an avid golfer, but he was a hard worker. He was the greatest man I ever knew. His pride and joy was his hula troop, composed of wives and daughters of his officers. The hula troop danced for all the aircraft carriers that came in to tie up at Pearl Harbor. All of the dancers were awarded trophies indicating the number of ships they had danced for. And while we were on the staff, the Admiral served as king of the Mardi Gras, and his wife Madeline served as queen. Sarah and I dressed for the occasion too. It was a great 2 years, and we hated for it to end. Our aloha party aboard the Lurline was something to remember. Martin Denny and his musical group were aboard the Lurline, and they entertained the guests all the way across the Pacific. At one time, in my heyday, I was responsible for 18 half hours a week on the air, including 2 90-minute shows, which we did live every Saturday and Sunday. We did a Saturday show called Saturday. Imagine where we get that title, being an NBC station. And we had a Sunday show called Sunday. And we used as anchors on this program our top newscasters. Tom Snyder, when he was in our news department, used to host the Sunday show. We would have our show on the air shows originating at some event. So we didn't just go out and open the microphones on the street and do a show, but we tried to tie in with something. If the Encino Pueblo House historic monument was having a celebration, we would show up there with our unit, and we brought our own guest as well as their guest. We originated from everywhere. That show ran on the air for 10 years probably. Never missed a Sunday, and was very successful. Mother and I went everywhere, more than once. We made 3 trips to China, 2 trips to Alaska, more trips than I can remember to the Caribbean, up and down the coast in Mexico. We went to India. The story about that is, in 1974, I guess it was, that we decided we should travel. So Sarah's brother Larry was a world traveler. He went everywhere. Larry, if you have to go just one place in the world, where would you go? And it didn't take him 10 seconds. India. So Sarah and I went off for 5 weeks to Sri Lanka and India and Nepal and all of India. Spent a lot of time at the Sepulveda Men's Golf Club. I edited the newsletter. I took that over. It was a mimeograph sheet, literally. Except it wasn't doing mimeography. It was done on an offset, but it was a cut and paste thing with no graphics. And I took over that, and with my computer, I made it into a good newspaper. It's funny that this newspaper thing goes through my whole background, because in high school I did it. In the Navy, we had a station newspaper, which, as public information officer, I supervised. And then when I was in Hawaii on the Admiral staff, I edited a monthly magazine on anti-submarine warfare, which was designed for use in the fleet, in the Pacific Fleet. It was a classified magazine. It was never publicly available, although I've got one copy. And I've always been basically lazy, and I was in perfect shape for retirement. I never had any regrets. I have never gone back. Even in the Navy, I have no regrets. I enjoyed what I did. I enjoyed when I did it. That was one stage of my life. We cut it off here and go do this broadcasting thing. And we finished the broadcasting, we just cut it off and go to the retirement thing. Except mother always teased me that you spent the first 20 years of your life studying in high school and college and law school and all those kind of things. Then you spend 20 years in the Navy. And then you spend 20 years at NBC. Retirement is only going to be 20 years. After 20 years, you better find something to do. but I never did. One of the best things about being retired is you have time to meet with all of your old friends, like Fern Murphy, George Burke, and Merlin and Peggy Alley. Merlin was my boss in BD2 during World War II.